Advertising effectiveness. Advertising effectiveness is concerned with evaluating the effectiveness of advertising. It involves relating advertising results to the established standards of performance based on various parameters like reach, coverage, ability to motivate customers to buy product, etc. The effectiveness of advertising in a particular media may also be measured in any of the following ways: by giving different addresses to different media. Different newspapers may be selected for advertisement of different departments. Blank coupons may be provided with the advertisement. Enquiry from customers should be mentioned the name of the source of information. Importance of measuring the effectiveness of advertisement to get the to get the cost benefits of advertising, to justify the investments in advertising, to compare the results with the objectives and goals, to know the communication effect compared to markets basis or for planning. Method of measuring advertising effectiveness. There is two types of method. There may be two types measures of advertising effectiveness, namely direct measures and indirect measures. Direct measures include historical sales method, experimental control. Experimental control includes before after with control group design and multivariable experimental. Then indirect measures includes exposure to advertisement, extension or recall, attention or recall of advertisement. Measure contains brand awareness, comprehension, attitude change, and action. Direct measures of advertising effectiveness. Under direct method measures, a relationship between advertising and sales is established. A comparison of sales of two period or two market may be done, and the corresponding change may be noted. The following are some of the mentioned methods that are generally used in measuring that advertising effect. Historical sales methods. Some insights into the effectiveness of past advertising may be obtained by measuring the relationship between the advertising expenditure and the total sales of the product. A multiple regression analysis of advertising expenditure and sales over several time period may be calculated. It would show how the change in advertising experiment have corresponding changes in sales volume. The technique estimates the contribution that advertising has made to explaining in a correlationship manner rather than a casual sale. The variation in sales over the time period covers in the study. Experimental control. The other measure of advertising effectiveness is the method of experimental control, where a causal relationship between the sales is established. The method is quite expensive when related to other advertising effectiveness measures, yet it is possible to isolate advertising contributions to sales. Moreover, this can be done as a pre-test to aid advertising in choosing between alternative corrective creative designs, media schedules, expenditure levels, or some combinations of these advertising decision areas. One experimental approach to measuring the sales effectiveness of advertising is test marketing. Before after with control group design. The classic design uses several test and control cities in the design. Two types of cities are selected. Cities in which advertising campaigns are effective may be named a test city as test cities, and other cities may be called central cities. First of all, the normal sales level is calculated for both type of cities prior to advertising campaigns, and then the advertising campaign is presented to the test cities and not to the central cities. The effect of advertising campaigns can then be measured by subtracting the amount of post-campaign figures of the sales from the pre-campaign sales figure in the test cities. Then multivariable experimental designs. Well, the experimental design discussed about yield a reasonable accurate estimate of the effects of the advertising on sales. It is not successful in explaining the success or failure of the campaign itself. Motivable design produce this explanations and are therefore used by some very large firms before of their diagnostic value. The power of this multivariable factors design is explained by G.H. Brown, former Ford's Director of Marketing Research. For any single medium, 8 possible geographical areas have been exposed and 8 have not been exposed. Thus, in this experimental model, it is possible to evaluate how each individual medium behaves alone, and in all possible to evaluate how each individual media behaves alone and in all possible combinations with other medium. Indirect measures of advertising effectiveness, as it is very difficult to measure the direct effect of advertising on companies' profits or sales. Most firms rely heavily on indirect measures. These measures do not evaluate the effect of advertising directly on sales or profit, but other factors such as customer awareness or attitude or customer recall of advertising message affects the sales or profits or goals of the business. Indirectly design the uncertainties about the relationship between the intermediate effect of advertising and the ultimate results. There is no other alternative but to use indirect measure. They are the most commonly used measures are exposure to advertisement. In order to be effective, the advertiser must gain exposure. The management is concerned about the number of target audience who see or hear the organization measures set in the advertisement. Without exporting advertisement is born in failure. Marketers are advertising may obtain an idea of exposure generated by the medium by explaining its circulations or audience data, which reveals the number of copies of the riding in transit facilities or the number of persons living in the viewing or radio listening areas and the number of persons switching on their TV and radio sets at various points of time. The number can be estimated by interviewing the number of the audience for different media. Extension or recall of advertising message content. This is one of the widely used measures of advertising results. Under the measures, a recall of the message content among a specific group or people of prospective customers in measures within 24 hours of the exposure of the attention values. The chief quality of the advertising copy The advertisement cannot be said to be effective unless the attract the extension of the target consumers. There are two methods of evaluating the attention getting value of the advertisement, one of the pre-test and the other is post-test. In the pre-test evaluation, the consumers are asked to indicate the extent to which they recognize or recall the advertisement they have already seen. The test is conducted in the laboratory setting. Here consumers read, hear or listen to the advertisement and then researchers ask questions regarding the advertisement just to test the recall and then evaluate it in post-test method. The consumers are asked questions about the indications of the recognition or recall after the advertisement has been run. This measure ensures the customers can recall or recognize what they have viewed or listened to various mechanical devices and are being used in the western countries which provide indicates attention such as eye camera etc. Brand awareness. The marketers who rely heavily on advertising often appraise its effectiveness by measuring the customer's awareness about the particular product or brand. The assumptions of this type of measure is that there is a direct relationship between the advertisement and the awareness. This type of measure is also subject to the same criticism as is applicable to direct measures or effectiveness. Sales is also affected by many other factors, but for new products, change in awareness can often be attributed to the influence of advertising. Comprehension. Comprehension. Consumers generally use advertising as a means of obtaining information about the product, brand, or the manufacturer. They cannot be informed unless they comprehend the message, grasp the message mentally, and understand it fully. Various tests for valuing comprehensions are available. One is recall test and indicates an indicator of comprehension because it is evident that consumers recall what they comprehend. Another measure of the variable is to ask questions about subjects, how much they have comprehended a message they have recently heard or seen. One may employ somewhat imprecise test of the comprehension of a newspaper or and radio advertisement. One may ask typical target consumers from time to time such questions like what did you think of our new commercial and did it get the message across. The answer of this question will provide sufficient insights into advertising decision making. Attitude change. Since advertising is considered to be one way of influencing the state of the mind of the audiences towards a product, service, or organization, the results are very often measured in terms of attitude amongst group exposed to advertising communication. Several methods or measures are used ranging from asking the questions about willingness to buy, the likelihood of buying, to the measurement of the extent to which specific attributes such as modern or new are associated with a product. Action is one objective of advertising may be assumed to be to stimulate actions or behavior. The action or intentions to take an action may be measured on the intention to buy measure instruments. Under this type of measure, consumers are asked to respond why they are interested in purchasing the product or brand. One type of action that advertising attempts to induce is buying behavior. The assumption is that if an increase in sale follows a decrease in advertising expenditure, the change in sales level are good indicators of the effectiveness of advertising. Logic suggests that measures of sales is preferable to other measurements. Thus, this above measure, direct or indirect, are used to evaluate the effectiveness of advertising. It seems from the analysis of the above method of measuring advertising effectiveness that directly or indirectly change in sales or profit are taken as a measure role of the effectiveness of the advertisement.